The Galactic Council, an assembly of the most powerful and advanced civilizations in the galaxy, had recently stumbled upon Earth. In the grand scheme of things, Earth seemed irrelevant. It was a small, blue planet located on the fringes of known space, its inhabitants barely capable of escaping their own atmosphere. To the Council, this was just another backwater planet to observe and dismiss. Professor Liner, a prominent Borean historian, stood at the front of the lecture hall. His large, insectoid figure loomed over the group of young Borean students seated before him. His 6 legs were planted firmly on the ground, and his clawed hands tapped rhythmically on the podium as he prepared to begin his lecture. Today, Liner began, his voice a low, rumbling hiss. We will discuss the most recent discovery by the Galactic Council's surveyors, a planet known as Earth. The lecture hall was filled with murmurs of disinterest. Earth was a subject that had been circulating for some time, and the general consensus among the students was that it wasn't worth their attention. What could a primitive planet inhabited by weak, soft-skinned bipeds possibly offer to the galaxy? A young Borean student sitting in the back of the hall wasn't so sure. He had been following the reports on Earth with growing curiosity. The humans, as they were called, intrigued him. There was something about their rapid technological progress that didn't quite fit the pattern of other species the Council had encountered. Carr's compound eyes flickered as he leaned forward, listening intently. Earth, Liner continued, is home to a species called humans. Our first scout ship landed on this dirt ball only a few cycles ago. The humans at that time could barely escape their own atmosphere. The galactic community dismissed Earth as useless, and I would say rightfully so. He paused, clicking through slides that displayed images of Earth and its inhabitants. The students chuckled as pictures of humans appeared on the large screen behind the professor. They looked small, weak, and unimpressive compared to the imposing figures of the Boreans or the sleek forms of the Zalar, another member species of the Galactic Council. Carr, however, felt a strange unease. While most of his peers were laughing, his attention was drawn to the humans' eyes in the pictures. There was something there, something more than weakness. A certain intensity burned behind their seemingly soft features. It was an expression he had seen before in the annals of history: determination. The humans, Liner said with disdain, are nothing more than primitives. They lack any significant military strength, their technology is outdated, and they rely on combustion engines. Can you imagine? He spat the last sentence as if it left a bad taste in his mouth. Our council has encountered hundreds of species like this before, and Earth is no different. Despite the professor's words, Carr's mind wandered. There was something that didn't add up. How could such a species, weak as they appeared, survive in the harsh conditions of their world? Earth had been classified as a Class 7 planet, a dangerous and volatile environment filled with violent weather patterns, predators, and natural disasters. Most civilizations at Earth's level of development would have perished long before reaching their current state. Yet, humans had not only survived but thrived. Carr made a note to research Earth further. As the lecture continued, the professor displayed a final image, an Earth cityscape from above, its gleaming skyscrapers a stark contrast to the natural wilderness surrounding it. And this, Liner scoffed, is their so-called achievement. Primitive structures made of steel and glass, no match for the advanced technologies of the Council. He turned off the projector, bringing the lecture to a close. In conclusion, Liner said, Earth and its inhabitants are inconsequential. The Galactic Council will monitor them, of course, but they pose no threat to the galaxy at large. They are a footnote in the history of advanced civilizations. The students gathered their belongings, still chuckling over the pictures of humans. As they filed out of the lecture hall, Carr remained seated for a moment, deep in thought. Later that day, Carr returned to his quarters and accessed the Galactic archives. He wanted to know more about the humans. He entered a query into the database, sifting through the official reports on Earth. Most of it was as expected: assessments of their technological development, environmental reports, and dismissals of their potential threat to the galaxy. But then Carr stumbled upon a classified file. His antennae twitched with interest. It was unusual for information on such a seemingly unimportant planet to be locked behind security protocols. Driven by curiosity, Carr bypassed the encryption. The file revealed something unexpected. The Galactic Council had sent a delegation to Earth only a few rotations ago. The leader of the delegation was Zorak, a notorious diplomat from the Zella species. Known for his arrogance and short temper, Zorak was tasked with assessing Earth's potential to join the Council, or, more likely, ensuring they didn't interfere with galactic affairs. Carr read the report with growing intrigue. It described the humans' response to Zorak's demands in detail. Zorak had arrived on Earth with a small contingent of Council diplomats, expecting the humans to submit to the Council's rule without hesitation. The report described how Zorak, in his usual pompous manner, had boasted about the Council's technological superiority and military might, expecting the humans to cower in fear. But they hadn't. The human leader, identified in the report as Ambassador John Andrews, stood firm. He refused to submit, stating that Earth would not be bullied into submission by an alien power. The report detailed the tense exchange between the two parties. Zorak had threatened to obliterate Earth, reducing the planet to ashes with the Council's vast fleet. Andrews had simply smiled. "You're welcome to try," he had said. Carr leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. How could these humans, so weak in appearance, be so bold in the face of certain destruction? What gave them the confidence to defy the Galactic Council? The report ended abruptly, leaving Carr with more questions than answers. What happened after that meeting? Did the Council follow through with its threats? And if so, how had the humans responded? Carr's mandibles clicked in frustration. He needed more information. The young Borean accessed the galactic news networks, hoping to find recent updates on Earth's status. His compound eyes widened as a breaking news alert flashed across his screen. Galactic Council launches invasion fleet to subdue Earth. The headline blared in bold letters. Carr's heart raced as he read the details. A massive armada had been dispatched to Earth, consisting of ships from some of the most powerful member species of the Council. Sleek Zella destroyers, heavily armored Borean battlecruisers, and nimble Krarr fighters, all converging on the human homeworld. The Council was done with negotiations. The invasion was meant to be swift and decisive, a show of power to remind the humans of their place. But as Carr scoured the reports, he noticed something strange. The Council fleet was taking longer than expected to reach Earth, and no updates had come through in the last few cycles. Something was wrong. Carr felt a chill crawl up his spine. What had the humans done? How were they responding to this invasion? As he stared at the news feeds, a thought crept into his mind, one that made his antennae twitch with anticipation. Maybe Earth wasn't as insignificant as the Council believed. Perhaps the humans, in their defiance, were about to change the course of galactic history. And Carr, deep down, knew that this was just the beginning. The Galactic Council's decision to send an invasion fleet to Earth had been swift, the result of a collective arrogance that had settled over the member species for millennia. For too long, the Council had assumed that its technological superiority and vast military power were unassailable. It had subdued countless worlds, each one bending to its will without resistance. Earth, in the Council's eyes, was no different, a small, insignificant world that dared to defy them. As the invasion fleet closed in on the Sol system, the Council was already discussing how to divide Earth's resources among the member species. They viewed this as a routine operation, one that would take no more than a few rotations to complete. But as the fleet approached the outer perimeter of the system, they began encountering anomalies. The first sign of trouble came when the lead destroyer, the Valiant Zephyr, lost contact with the rest of the fleet. The captain, a Zella commander named Zorix, had been preparing his ship for battle when all communication was cut off. One moment, they were receiving constant updates from the fleet, The next, nothing. Zorix, a cold and methodical leader, initially assumed it was a technical malfunction. He ordered his crew to run diagnostics on their communication systems, but the results came back clear. There was nothing wrong with their equipment. The problem, it seemed, was external. "Commander, we are picking up a strange energy signature," his second-in-command, Officer Larrick, reported. The Zeller officer's voice was tinged with confusion as she examined the readings. "It appears to be coming from the edge of the system." Zorix frowned. "What kind of signature?" Larrick hesitated before responding. "It's unlike anything we've seen before. It doesn't match any known weapon or defense system in the Galactic Council's database." The commander narrowed his eyes. "Humans. Are they responsible for this?" "Unlikely," Larrick replied. "They shouldn't have the technology to produce such a signature." But Zorix wasn't convinced. The humans had already defied their expectations once by refusing to submit. Perhaps they had some hidden weapon, some ancient relic of technology they had unearthed on their primitive world. The Zeller commander considered his options. They could proceed toward Earth and risk further anomalies, or they could retreat and regroup with the rest of the fleet. Zorix was not one to retreat. "Take us closer to the source of the energy signature," he ordered. As the valiant Zephyr moved deeper into the Sol system, the strange energy signature intensified. It wasn't long before the crew began experiencing other, more disturbing phenomena. Instruments malfunctioned, navigation systems went haywire, and the ship's sensors became unreliable, picking up phantom readings that made no sense. Zorix gripped the armrest of his command chair, his nerves fraying. "Larrick, what is happening? Get me an answer." "I'm trying, Commander," Larrick replied, her voice strained as she worked feverishly at her console. "It's like the entire system is interfering with our technology. I can't explain it, but I'm picking up multiple ships around us, yet there's nothing visible on the scanners." "Ghost readings," Zorix muttered. "This is some kind of human trickery." Before he could give another order, the lights on the bridge flickered, plunging the crew into momentary darkness. When they came back on, the view from the main screen sent a chill through the entire crew. Ships. Dozens of them. But they weren't Galactic Council vessels. They were crude by comparison, built from metal and using what appeared to be traditional combustion engines. Yet there was something deeply unsettling about them. These human ships, though seemingly outdated, had an undeniable aura of purpose and strength. They were positioned with military precision, surrounding the valiant Zephyr on all sides, their weapons trained on the destroyer. "Where did they come from?" Zorix demanded, standing up in shock. "They weren't on our sensors a moment ago," Larrick whispered. "They just appeared." Zorix felt a creeping fear rise in his chest. The humans shouldn't have been capable of cloaking technology, yet here they were, an entire fleet of them, hidden in plain sight. Before he could react, a message flashed across the screen. "Attention Galactic Council forces. You are TRESPSSING in Sol territory. Turn back immediately or face consequences." Zorix's mandibles clicked in frustration. The audacity of these humans. He had expected them to resist, but this was a show of force he hadn't anticipated. His arrogance faltered for the first time as he considered the implications. "Commander," Larrick said, her voice low and tense, "our weapons systems are offline." "What?" Zorix spun to face her, his expression one of disbelief. "The humans, they've somehow disabled our ship's systems. I don't know how, but we are defenseless." For a long moment, the bridge was silent as the weight of Larrick's words sank in. The invincible valiant Zephyr, one of the most advanced ships in the Galactic Council fleet, had been rendered helpless by a group of humans, primitives who shouldn't have been able to compete with their superior technology. Zorix had no choice. "Send a distress signal to the rest of the fleet," he ordered. "We can't," Larrick replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Communications are completely blocked." Panic began to spread among the crew. Zorix felt it too, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. The humans had them at a disadvantage, but they hadn't fired yet. Perhaps this was all a bluff, a desperate attempt to scare them off. The commander straightened and narrowed his eyes at the human ships surrounding them. "Stand your ground," he ordered. "They won't dare fire on a Galactic Council ship. Prepare to engage once our systems come back online." But as Zorix gave his orders, something unexpected happened. One of the human ships broke formation and slowly approached the valiant Zephyr. It wasn't a massive warship like the Council destroyer. In fact, it looked much smaller, almost fragile by comparison. Yet it moved with a confidence that unsettled the crew. The ship stopped just outside of visual range. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, without warning, a single projectile shot from the human vessel. It wasn't a laser or plasma burst, just a solid metal projectile, something the Galactic Council hadn't used in millennia. The projectile struck the valiant Zephyr with precision, piercing its hull with ease. There was a deafening explosion as the destroyer's shield systems failed, followed by the sound of alarms blaring throughout the ship. Zorix stumbled, catching himself on the railing as the ship shook violently. "Damage report," he shouted over the chaos. Larik's voice was trembling now. "The projectile. It's caused a chain reaction in our power core. We're losing containment. The ship is going tow." Before she could finish her sentence, another explosion rocked the ship. This one was far more catastrophic. The valiant Zephyr was torn apart from the inside, its once mighty frame crumbling as fire and debris filled the bridge. Zorix's last thought as the ship disintegrated around him was one of disbelief. How could this have happened? How could a group of primitive humans have defeated one of the most advanced ships in the galaxy with nothing more than a simple projectile? The valiant Zephyr was gone, reduced to a cloud of debris drifting in the void of space. Back on Earth, in a secret underground command center, Ambassador John Andrews stood before a holographic display of the Sol system. His face was calm, though his eyes were fixed on the icon that represented the destroyed Zella destroyer. "One down," he muttered to himself. "Let's see how many more the Council sends before they realize they've made a mistake." Around him, human officers monitored the situation, their hands moving quickly across control panels as they tracked the remaining Council fleet. "Sir," one of the officers said, looking up from her screen, "we've detected movement from the rest of the fleet. They're hesitating, but it looks like they're still advancing." Andrews nodded. "Good, let them come. They're about to learn what happens when you underestimate humanity." He turned to the holographic display, his mind already working on the next move. The Galactic Council had pushed Earth into a corner, but humanity had always thrived under pressure. They had prepared for this moment, knowing that the only way to survive in a galaxy full of hostile forces was to be ready to strike back. And strike back they would. As the Council fleet continued its approach, Andrews couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. The Galactic Council fleet, still reeling from the destruction of the valiant Zephyr, regrouped at the edge of the Sol system. Confusion spread among the alien commanders like a virus. How had the humans done it? How had a single projectile, seemingly outdated by galactic standards, taken down one of the Council's most advanced destroyers? At the helm of the remaining fleet was Grand Admiral Jorak, a battle-hardened veteran from the Draxa species. His skin, covered in thick, scarred scales, had witnessed more wars than most species lived to see. Jorak wasn't one to panic, but he couldn't deny the strangeness of the situation. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, he stared at the holographic display of the Sol system. A dozen Council ships were hovering at the outskirts of the system, their commanders waiting for orders, paralyzed by the unexpected loss of the valiant Zephyr. "Commander Urk, what's our status?" Jorak growled, his voice low and gravelly. Urk, his second-in-command, was a thin, nervous member of the Telk species, with large, bulbous eyes that darted across the control panels. "Fleet remains in position, sir. We're detecting no further anomalies, but communication disruptions are still widespread. Jorek clenched his jaw. The Council was used to crushing rebellions with overwhelming force, but these humans, they weren't playing by the usual rules. The old tactics weren't going to work here. Send out a recon team. I want to know exactly what happened to the Zephyr, Jorek ordered, his sharp claws tapping against the console. Urk hesitated, his eyes widening. Admiral, are you sure? If the humans have more of those. Jorek glared at him, silencing the officer with a single look. We don't cower in the face of primitives, Urk. Send the recon team, and bring me answers. Reluctantly, Urk nodded and relayed the order. Within minutes, 3 sleek scout ships broke formation and headed toward the remnants of the valiant Zephyr. These ships were smaller, faster, and designed to avoid detection. If the humans had more tricks up their sleeves, they wouldn't be able to catch these scouts. Also, Jorek hoped. As the recon teams sped into the system, Jorek turned his attention to the planet itself. Earth. From the reports the Council had gathered, it was a backwater world, unremarkable in its resources or technological achievements. Yet, here they were, stalling a fleet that could reduce most planets to dust in hours. Why are we still having communication issues? Jorek asked, his voice betraying his frustration. Humans shouldn't be able to block our systems so easily. Urk checked the status of their communications network again. It's not the humans directly, Admiral. There's some sort of interference originating from a series of satellites surrounding Earth. We believe they set up an advanced jamming system, but we can't pinpoint the exact frequency. Then pinpoint it, Jorek snapped. Ah yes, Admiral, Urk stammered, turning to the technicians working feverishly to break through the interference. Jorek returned his gaze to the holographic map, narrowing his eyes as he examined the planet. Something was off. The humans had destroyed a Council destroyer and blocked communications, yet they hadn't launched a full assault. They were toying with the fleet, waiting for something. But what? On Earth, Ambassador John Andrews was standing in the underground command center once again, surrounded by his team of military strategists and engineers. They had successfully taken out one Council ship, but now the rest of the fleet was closing in. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the Council's scout ships moving toward the remains of the valiant Zephyr. Andrews folded his arms, his brow furrowing in thought. How long until the recon ships reached the debris field? Less than an hour, one of the officers replied. They'll be in range of the jamming satellites soon. Good, Andrews said, his voice calm. Let them come. He turned to Dr. Mia Torres, the chief engineer behind Earth's defense systems. She had been one of the leading minds in the development of the Iron Veil, a network of cloaked satellites designed to disrupt enemy communications and scramble targeting systems. Are we ready for Phase 2, Dr. Torres? Andrews asked. Torres nodded, her dark hair pulled back into a tight bun. The Iron Veil is holding up well. The scouts won't be able to see much once they enter the field, and if they get too close, they won't make it back, Andrews finished. I like the sound of that. Torres glanced at the display, her fingers tapping rapidly on the console as she monitored the satellites. It's risky, though. We can't keep the system active forever. Eventually, they'll start adapting, even if it takes them longer than most species. Andrews nodded in agreement. We'll have to push them into making the first mistake. If we're going to survive this, we need to control the narrative. The Council thinks they're superior. They'll overextend sooner or later. Out in space, the scout ships entered the debris field of the valiant Zephyr. The wreckage was still drifting, broken pieces of the once proud destroyer floating aimlessly in the void. The scouts maneuvered carefully, their sensors scanning the area for clues. This is Scout Leader Voss, the lead ship's pilot reported. We've entered the debris field, detecting traces of hull breaches and energy disruptions consistent with high-velocity projectiles. The other scouts confirmed similar findings as they navigated the wreckage. There was no sign of human ships, No evidence of a follow-up attack, but something still felt wrong. Scout leader, one of the other pilots said, "I'm getting strange readings. The energy signature in this area, it's fluctuating." Voss frowned, checking his own readings. "What do you mean?" "It's almost like the debris is interfering with our systems." Before Voss could respond, his ship's sensors went dead. He slammed his fist on the console in frustration. "We've lost all telemetry. What's going on out here?" Suddenly, the other scout ships began reporting similar issues. Their instruments were failing, and the jamming signals were intensifying. Voss tried to turn his ship around, but the controls were sluggish, unresponsive. And then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it. A shadow. It was barely visible against the backdrop of space, but it was there, a massive object lurking just beyond the debris field. At first, Voss thought it was more wreckage, but as it moved, he realized it was no dead hulk. It was a ship. A human ship. But this one was different from the crude vessels they had expected. It was sleek, dark, and impossibly large, its surface seemingly absorbing the light around it. Voss's breath caught in his throat as the ship began to power up, its weapons systems coming online. "Contact. We have her." Voss never finished his sentence. A beam of energy, precise and deadly, shot from the human ship, vaporizing the scout leader's vessel in an instant. The other scouts panicked, trying to flee, but the iron veil had scrambled their systems too thoroughly. One by one, the scouts were picked off by the mysterious ship until only silence remained. On board the Dominator, Grand Admiral Jorak stared in disbelief at the blank screens in front of him. The recon team's signals had vanished without a trace. No distress calls, no last-minute transmissions, just gone. The entire team had been wiped out. "Admiral, the recon ships." Urk began, his voice shaking. "I see it," Jorak growled, his fists clenched. This was no ordinary enemy they were facing. These humans had outmaneuvered them, using a combination of stealth and brute force that no Council fleet had ever encountered. Jorak's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. They had underestimated Earth. The humans were more advanced than they had believed, more dangerous. And now, the Council fleet was stuck in the middle of a battlefield they'd barely understood. "Prepare the fleet for full engagement," Jorak barked, his voice echoing through the bridge. "We're going in. No more games." Urk hesitated, his large eyes widening. "But sir, if we delay any longer, they'll pick us off ship by ship." Jorak interrupted, his voice cold and unyielding. "We strike now, with everything we have, or we die like the fools before us." Urk swallowed hard and relayed the order. The Council fleet began to move, their engines roaring to life as they pushed deeper into the Sol system toward Earth. Jorak watched the display, his eyes narrowing. The humans had given them a taste of their defenses, but this time, the Council would not be caught off guard. They would bring the full might of their fleet down on this insignificant planet and crush the human resistance once and for all. At least, that was the plan. Back on Earth, Andrews watched as the Council fleet advanced, a grim smile playing on his lips. "They're coming," he said softly, turning to Torres. "Everything's ready, sir," Torres replied, her voice steady. The Earth was an orb of blue and green, still untouched by the devastation the Galactic Council had promised. It floated serenely in the distance as the Council fleet made its final approach, engines roaring in the vacuum of space. The ships, once spread out across the system, now gathered in a unified, menacing formation, each vessel bristling with weapons. Grand Admiral Jorak stood at the helm of the Dominator, his gaze fixed on the display in front of him. The scouts had been eliminated, and he had no idea how, but it didn't matter anymore. The time for subtlety had passed. The humans had drawn first blood, and now the Council would respond with overwhelming force. "The fleet is in position, Admiral," Commander Urk reported, his voice quivering slightly. The failure of the reconnaissance mission still weighed heavily on his mind, and the tension in the command center was palpable. Jorek's eyes narrowed. Good. Begin the attack. Full barrage. Urk nodded, turning to the tactical officers. Prepare all weapons. Target Earth's primary defense grid. Fire on my command. Far below, in the underground command center on Earth, John Andrews stood watching the approaching fleet on the massive tactical display. The room was eerily quiet, filled only with the steady hum of computers and the occasional murmurs of officers giving reports. Everyone knew what was coming. The council was done playing around. Dr. Mia Torres was by his side, her hands clasped behind her back as she studied the fleet's movements. They're not holding back this time, she said softly. This is everything they've got. Andrews nodded, his expression grim. They think they can overwhelm us. They still don't know what they're dealing with. Torres glanced at him, her lips pressing into a thin line. You're sure we're ready? We've never tested the full capabilities of the Iron Veil against a force like this. We don't have a choice, Andrews replied. If we fail, Earth is finished. The Council will burn our planet to the ground. There was no time for hesitation, no room for doubt. Earth had always been an underdog in the galaxy, underestimated by species with far greater technology and firepower. But humans had a history of turning desperate situations into victories. Today would be no different. Activate the planetary shields, Andrews ordered. One of the officers quickly relayed the command, and a series of confirmations echoed through the command center. Within moments, a shimmering energy field began to form around the Earth, faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. This was Earth's last line of defense, an energy shield designed to absorb and deflect incoming attacks. Torres watched the shields flicker to life, her brow furrowed with concentration. The shield won't hold forever. We've made improvements, but with the firepower they're bringing. We just need it to hold long enough, Andrews said. He turned to another officer. What's the status of the Iron Veil? Fully operational, sir. The satellites are in position, and the jamming field is at full strength. Good. Once they're within range, we'll show them what real warfare looks like. Out in space, the Galactic Council fleet prepared to unleash their fury. Energy beams, plasma cannons, and torpedoes were all locked onto their targets, Earth's defense grid and its cities. The humans were about to feel the full weight of the galaxy's most powerful military force. Fire! Commander Urk shouted. In an instant, a barrage of bright, searing lights shot forth from the Council's ships, streaking across the void toward Earth. Plasma beams cut through the darkness like fiery swords, while missile salvos curved through space, guided by precision targeting systems. The air crackled with raw energy as the attack unfolded, unstoppable and terrifying in its intensity. But just as the first wave of attacks was about to reach Earth's atmosphere, something strange happened. The plasma beams, which should have incinerated everything in their path, flickered and warped, as if passing through an unseen force. The missiles veered off course, their targeting systems scrambled. One by one, the projectiles began to fail, either detonating harmlessly in the upper atmosphere or drifting aimlessly into space. On the bridge of the Dominator, Admiral Jorek stared in disbelief as the initial wave of attacks fizzled out. What is happening? He growled, his fists clenching in frustration. Their defense grid. No, something else is interfering with our targeting systems. Urk explained, his hands moving frantically across the console as he tried to make sense of the readings. We can't get a lock on their coordinates. The Iron Veil. Jorek muttered, realization dawning on him. They deployed some sort of advanced jamming system. Urk's large eyes darted to the Admiral. What do we do, sir? Our weapons are useless. Jorek's eyes burned with rage, but he forced himself to stay calm. We adapt. We don't need precision strikes to destroy their cities. Increase the power to the main cannons and prepare for a saturation bombardment. If we can't target them directly, we'll reduce the entire planet to rubble. In the Earth Command Center, Andrews watched as the Council's second wave of attacks gathered. The fleet had adjusted, increasing the intensity of their firepower. This time, they weren't aiming for precision. They were going to flood the planet with destructive force. "They're getting desperate," Andrews said quietly. "Good." Torres frowned. "Good? They're about to unleash enough firepower to level half the planet. And they're not thinking anymore. Desperation makes them sloppy." Andrews looked at her, his eyes hard. "That's when we strike." Torres nodded, understanding what he meant. The Iron Veil had done its job, but the real test was about to begin. "Initiate counteroffensive protocols," Andrews ordered. Across the surface of the Earth, hidden silos began to open, and massive cannons emerged from their underground bunkers. These were not traditional weapons. Humanity had spent years preparing for the possibility of an alien invasion, and they had developed a whole new class of weaponry: hypersonic kinetic projectiles, railguns capable of firing tungsten rods at near-light speeds, and advanced energy weapons unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Target their capital ships," Andrews said, his voice cold and precise. "Let's see how they like it." From the ground, Earth's counterattack began. Tungsten rods shot from railguns at incomprehensible speeds, piercing the darkness of space like darts thrown by the gods. Energy beams, crackling with electricity, lanced upward, slicing through the void toward the Council fleet. These weapons were designed to bypass traditional energy shields, exploiting weaknesses in the ship's defenses. The first of the Council ships to feel the wrath of Earth's defenses was the Paragon, a heavy cruiser stationed near the center of the fleet. It never stood a chance. A single tungsten rod, fired from a railgun on Earth's surface, slammed into the cruiser at such high velocity that it tore through the ship's hull like paper. The impact shattered the vessel in an instant, sending debris and fire spreading across the void. On the Dominator, Jorek's eyes widened as one of his ships vanished from the tactical display. "Direct hit on the Paragon, Admiral," Urk reported, panic creeping into his voice. "They've got planetary weapons capable of piercing our armor." One of the officers shouted. "We're sustaining heavy damage." Jorek slammed his fist on the console, his rage barely contained. "Pull back. Regroup outside of their range. We need tow." Before he could finish, another of his capital ships was struck, this time by an energy beam that cut clean through its reactor core. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, sending shockwaves rippling through the fleet. "Admiral, we're being decimated," Urk shouted, "if we don't retreat." Jorek's eyes burned with fury, but he knew Urk was right. They had severely underestimated Earth's defenses, and now his fleet was paying the price. He had no choice but to retreat and rethink his strategy. "All ships, fall back to the outer perimeter," Jorek growled, his voice dripping with frustration. "We'll regroup and find a way to neutralize their defenses. This isn't over." As the battered remnants of the Council fleet began to pull back, the Earth Command Center erupted in cheers. Andrews allowed himself a small smile, though he knew the battle was far from over. "They'll be back," Torres said, her voice cautious. Andrews nodded. "I know, but now they know humanity isn't going down without a fight." The first wave had been repelled, but the war was just beginning. And the galaxy was about to learn that humans, once underestimated, were far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. As the battered Galactic Council fleet retreated to the outer edges of Earth's defense perimeter, Admiral Jorak paced the bridge of the Dominator, seething in silent rage. The ships he commanded had once been the symbol of the Council's unbeatable might, but they had been brought low by a planet he had deemed primitive and inferior. "We underestimated them," Commander Urk muttered, rubbing his temple as the realization sunk in. "The humans, they're more advanced than any of us thought." Jorek's fists clenched tightly behind his back. "No," he spat. "They've merely prepared for this moment, and we were careless. We won't make that mistake again." Urk glanced nervously at his superior, unsure of how to proceed. Admiral, we need to regroup, analyze the new data, and devise a strategy that can neutralize their planetary defenses. I know that, Jorek snapped, his anger flaring. But his eyes softened as he turned back to the display of Earth, still protected by the shimmering iron veil. He knew Urk was right. They needed to rethink their approach. The brute force tactics they had relied on were not going to work here. Deploy long-range reconnaissance drones, Jorek ordered, his voice more measured. I want a complete analysis of their defense systems. Every weakness, every gap. We'll find a way through. Urk quickly relayed the command, and a series of sleek, advanced drones launched from the Council fleet, disappearing into the blackness of space as they moved toward Earth. Meanwhile, on the surface of Earth, John Andrews and Dr. Mia Torres stood in the command center, their expressions grim. The initial wave of the Council's assault had been repelled, but the atmosphere was far from celebratory. They've pulled back, Torres said, her eyes fixed on the tactical display, but they're not done. Andrews nodded, his gaze steely. No, they're regrouping. This was just the beginning. He walked over to the main console, where data from their earlier counterattack was still streaming in. Earth's defenses had held up well, but it had been a close call. The Iron Veil had performed beyond expectations, and their planetary weapons had proven devastatingly effective. But the Galactic Council was a massive, sprawling empire, and this fleet was just a fraction of their total military might. They'll come back stronger, Torres said, echoing Andrews' thoughts. We need to be ready. Andrews didn't respond immediately. His mind was already racing through their next steps, their next moves. Earth couldn't rely solely on its defenses. Sooner or later, the Council would figure out how to breach the Iron Veil, and when that happened, their last line of protection would crumble. We won't just be ready, Andrews said finally, his voice low but resolute. We're going to take the fight to them. Torres turned to him, her eyebrows raised in surprise. Take the fight to the Council. Andrews nodded. We've been on the defensive long enough. They attacked us, thinking we were weak. They wanted to make an example of Earth, but now that they've seen what we can do, they'll double down on their efforts. If we wait for them to strike again, we might not survive the next wave. Torres folded her arms, considering his words. So, what's your plan? Andrews gestured to the tactical display, where the positions of the retreating Council fleet were still visible. We hit them where they least expect it. Their fleet is disorganized, scattered. They're trying to figure out how to beat us. Before they can, we show them that humanity isn't just good at defense. Torres frowned. We're talking about a preemptive strike on a fleet that still outnumbers us, even after the losses they took. If we miscalculate. I'm not suggesting we engage them head-on, Andrews said quickly. We use our strengths, our ingenuity, our unpredictability. We can't beat them by their rules. We have to rewrite the rules of the game. Torres studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. I see where you're going. We use guerrilla tactics. Hit and run. Disrupt their chain of command, destroy key ships, then disappear before they can retaliate. Exactly, Andrews said, a hint of a smile forming on his lips. We make them fight on our terms. But we'll need more than what we have on the surface to launch an effective strike, Torres pointed out. We need to mobilize the Hidden Fleet. Andrews' expression darkened. The Hidden Fleet was Earth's most closely guarded secret, a fleet of advanced warships constructed in secret deep in the asteroid belt, beyond the eyes of the Galactic Council. It was Earth's ultimate fallback plan, a weapon of last resort. But now it seemed there was no choice but to reveal its existence. I know, Andrews said quietly. It's time. In the asteroid belt, far from the watchful eyes of the galaxy, the Hidden Fleet lay dormant. Massive, sleek warships were hidden among the drifting rocks, their dark hulls blending seamlessly with the void of space. Each ship was armed with experimental weapons, advanced stealth technology, and the most cutting-edge defenses humanity had ever developed. As the command to mobilize the fleet was transmitted from Earth, the ships began to stir. Engines hummed to life, and systems powered up one by one. The captains of the fleet, hand-picked from Earth's best and brightest, had been waiting for this moment for years. All ships, prepare to move out, Captain Helen Carr, commander of the fleet, ordered as her flagship, the Resolute, began to rise from the asteroid field. The time has come. Carr was a seasoned veteran, one of the most respected officers in Earth's military. She had overseen the construction of the Hidden Fleet, and now she would lead it into battle for the first time. Her crew moved with precision, following her commands without question. This was the moment they had trained for, the moment they had prepared for in the shadows, while the rest of humanity fought on the surface. "The Council won't know what hit them," Carl muttered under her breath as the fleet began its approach toward Earth. She knew the risks. Engaging the Galactic Council directly was a dangerous move. But Earth couldn't afford to play it safe any longer. As the Hidden Fleet approached Earth, it activated its stealth systems, disappearing from all known sensors. Even the Council's most advanced detection technology wouldn't be able to pick up their presence. They would strike like ghosts, appearing out of nowhere to deliver a devastating blow before vanishing again. On the bridge of the Dominator, Admiral Jorak watched the latest scans of Earth's defenses with a growing sense of frustration. The humans had pulled off an impossible defense, and now his fleet was forced to regroup, licking its wounds. But he wasn't done yet. He would find a way to break through their defenses, no matter the cost. "Admiral," Urk called out, his voice trembling with unease. "Our long-range sensors just detected something." Jorak turned to him, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean, something?" Urk's hands moved quickly over the console, trying to make sense of the data. "I can't explain it, sir. It's like a ripple in space. Something massive is moving, but we can't lock onto it." Jorak's eyes narrowed. "Is it another human weapon?" I don't know, sir, but it's heading straight for us." Before Jorak could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. The tactical display flickered, showing several new contacts appearing just outside the fleet's perimeter. They had come out of nowhere, ships that had somehow evaded all detection until the last moment. "Incoming fire," an officer shouted. Out of the darkness, the Hidden Fleet struck. Railguns fired, hypersonic projectiles ripped through the vacuum of space, and energy beams lanced toward the Council's ships. One by one, the Council's vessels began to buckle under the assault, their shields failing and their hulls tearing apart. On the Dominator, Jorak's face twisted in disbelief as his fleet came under attack from an enemy they hadn't even known existed. "Where did they come from?" he bellowed. "How did they get past our defenses?" Urk's face had gone pale. "It's the humans, sir. They've been hiding a fleet, an entire armada." Jorak's hands tightened on the console. He had underestimated Earth before, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. "All ships return fire," he roared. "Do not let them escape." But it was too late. The Hidden Fleet had already struck its devastating blow, and before the Council's fleet could retaliate, the Earth ships disappeared once more into the void, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and confusion. The Galactic Council had come to Earth to crush humanity. Now they were beginning to realize just how far out of their depth they were. Back on Earth, Andrews watched the unfolding chaos with a grim smile. The Hidden Fleet had done its job, and the Council's forces were in disarray. But this was only the beginning. Humanity had survived the first storm, but there were more battles to come. "We've sent them a message," Andrews said quietly to Torres. "Now let's see if they're smart enough to listen." The Galactic Council's central command buzzed with tension. In the capital city of Verus Prime, the heart of the Council's vast empire, political leaders, strategists, and high-ranking military officers gathered around a massive holographic display showing the current state of the conflict with Earth. Ambassador Vala, one of the Council's most influential diplomats, stood at the center of the room, watching the disaster unfold in front of her. The reports were grim. Over half of the Council's fleet had been destroyed or disabled, and the remainder was scattered, vulnerable to more of Earth's stealth attacks. The hidden fleet had struck with terrifying precision, crippling the Council's forces without warning. "This is unacceptable," one of the councillors shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "How did we let this happen? How did these primitives outmaneuver us like this?" Vala remained calm, though inside, her frustration mirrored the councillors. "We underestimated them," she said, her voice measured. "Humanity was never as weak as we believed. Their technological capabilities far exceed what we had previously assessed." The room fell silent as her words sank in. The arrogance that had pervaded the Council's dealings with Earth was gone, replaced by the cold reality that they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. Earth was not just a rebellious backwater. It was a threat to the very core of the Council's authority. "They're using guerrilla tactics, superior stealth technology, and perhaps most dangerous of all, their unpredictability," Vala continued. "We've always viewed them as disorganized, fragmented, but they've adapted, united, and now they're fighting on their terms, not ours." "Then we need to escalate," another councillor interjected. "We can't allow this rebellion to continue. If we don't crush Earth now, other worlds will see this as a sign of weakness." Vala shook her head. "Escalation isn't the solution. We've already lost too many ships, and deploying more fleets won't guarantee success. The humans will pick them apart, just like they did with the first wave." "Then what do you suggest?" the councillor asked, his voice dripping with impatience. "Surrender." Vala's eyes narrowed. "No, but we must be smart. If we continue to throw our forces at them blindly, we'll lose. We need to understand how they're doing this. We need to learn their secrets." "How?" came the skeptical response. "We've sent drones, scouts. Nothing has gotten past their defenses." Vala allowed a small smile to cross her lips. "There's more than one way to gather intelligence. The humans have a weakness. They are compassionate, sentimental. We can exploit that." On Earth, the celebrations were muted. The Hidden Fleet's victory had bought humanity time, but everyone knew that the Galactic Council wouldn't retreat without a fight. John Andrews stood in the Central Command Center, reviewing the latest intelligence reports alongside Dr. Mia Torres. "The Council is regrouping," Torres said, frowning at the screen. "They're not done with us yet." "I never thought they would be," Andrews replied, his expression serious. "But we've hurt them. Badly. Now they're desperate, and desperate enemies are dangerous. We need to prepare for their next move," Torres said, her voice heavy with concern. "They won't make the same mistakes twice." Before Andrews could respond, a communications officer called out, "Sir, we've intercepted a transmission from the Council fleet." "Put it through," Andrews ordered. The holographic display in the center of the room flickered to life, revealing the image of Ambassador Vala. She was poised, composed, despite the situation her forces were in. Her sharp, piercing gaze seemed to cut through the distance between them. "Humans," she began, her voice cool and measured. "You have proven yourselves more capable than we expected, but this conflict need not continue. The Galactic Council is prepared to negotiate terms of peace." A murmur ran through the command center. Peace. After all this destruction, the idea seemed absurd. Andrews raised an eyebrow, his skepticism clear. "We're listening," he said cautiously. "The Council recognizes that Earth has demonstrated strength," Vala continued. "In light of this, we are willing to offer you a place within the Council as an equal member with full representation. Your people will benefit from the resources and protection of the most powerful alliance in the galaxy." Andrews exchanged a glance with Torres, who looked equally wary. "And in return," he asked. "You will cease all hostilities immediately," Vala replied smoothly. "Your fleet will stand down, and Earth's defenses will be integrated into the Council's network. Together, We can ensure the security and prosperity of your world." The offer was tempting, but Andrews wasn't fooled. The Galactic Council had shown its true face. They didn't want peace, they wanted control. They wanted to subjugate humanity, not coexist with it. "That's a generous offer," Andrews said, his tone careful. "But after everything that's happened, how can we trust the Council's intentions?" Vala's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of irritation in her eyes. Trust must be built through action. The Council recognizes the value of Earth's contributions. We're offering you a seat at the table, a chance to shape the future of the galaxy alongside us. Torres leaned in toward Andrews, whispering so only he could hear. "This is a trap. They're trying to lull us into lowering our defenses." "I know," Andrews whispered back, before turning his attention back to the hologram. "We'll consider your offer, Ambassador, but we'll need time to discuss it with our leadership." Vala nodded, though her gaze was still sharp, calculating. "Of course, but do not take too long. The galaxy is watching, and if we cannot reach an agreement, more blood will be shed." The transmission ended, and the room fell into a tense silence. "What do you think?" Torres asked. Andrews sighed. "It's a bluff. They're trying to buy time, just like we are." "So what do we do?" Andrews straightened, his resolve hardening. "We prepare. We keep our defenses strong, and we don't fall for their tricks. But we'll need more than just defense if we're going to win this war. We need to hit them where it hurts." Torres raised an eyebrow. "You mean their homeworld?" Andrews nodded. "Verus Prime. It's the heart of their empire. If we can strike there, disrupt their leadership, it could throw the Council into chaos." "That's a bold move," Torres said, though there was a hint of admiration in her voice. "But it's risky. If we fail, Earth falls," Andrews finished. "But it's a risk we have to take. We can't win this war by playing defense forever. We have to make them fear us." Torres was silent for a moment, then she nodded. "All right, but we'll need to gather intelligence. We can't just charge in blind." "I agree," Andrews said. "We'll send recon teams, and we'll work with the hidden fleet to develop a strike plan. We only get one shot at this." As the command center buzzed with activity, Andrews knew that the coming days would determine the fate of humanity. The Galactic Council was reeling, but they were still powerful, still dangerous. The war was far from over. But for the first time, Andrews felt that humanity had a real chance. They had proven that they could stand against the might of the galaxy. Now, they just had to finish the job. Back on Verus Prime, Ambassador Vala watched the fading transmission with a steely gaze. The humans weren't falling for the Council's ploy. That much was clear. But it didn't matter. Vala had already anticipated their refusal. The next phase of the plan was already in motion. "Initiate Project Dominion," Vala ordered, her voice cold and firm. At her command, the Council's most secretive military program, a devastating new weapon, began to activate. Hidden deep within the core of the Council's capital world, it was designed to be the ultimate deterrent, a force so powerful that no enemy could stand against it. Vala smiled grimly. The humans might think they had won the first battle, but the war was far from over, and the Council still had one final card to play.